Hello, and I'm bringing you another author chat today. I hope that you're having a wonderful Tuesday. I'm happy that you're joining me. Today I'm going to talk with Ｃaitlin Rother. I'm happy to tell you that she is my first repeat offender. I spoke with her once before, and we had such a great time talking about her fiction writing, which is what she has pivoted to recently. And we decided to go back and do a chat that's devoted to her true crime writing. So how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Yeah. So now you've been touring.
I've had 4 books in 15 months, which is just, I've never had that happen before, and I did not do it on purpose. I couldn't control it. But I'm still, in a normal life, I would still be talking about Down to the Bone.
Right.
So I appreciate you having me on to talk about it.
Oh, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about some of your prior true crime too, because
all right,
as you know, that's how I found you.
I know.
And the first one that got me interested was, of course, Dead Reckoning. So let's go back for a moment. For those who are not familiar with your writing or didn't watch the first chat, tell everybody a little bit about your background. I know you were a journalist. How did you get into writing true crime books?
Well, I started trying to write crime fiction. So I was learning how to be a reporter because, that's a craft, professional journalism writing and being an investigative reporter. To get really good at that, you don't just like wham, bam, you're good at it. It's just like any other kind of writing. You have to read a lot and you have to practice and you have to do it. So I was learning how to be a reporter. And in the meantime, on the weekends, I was taking writing workshops. This was in Northampton, Massachusetts. And I was working so hard. I'm like, well, I'm crazy. What am I thinking? A 3-hour workshop on a Sunday when I need to rest and prepare for the next week where I'm going to be writing, 2 stories a day, 2 briefs, 4 stories on Friday, and I'd just be exhausted. But I started taking these fiction. It was fiction writing mostly. They'd give you these trigger exercises and you'd write these little germs. Well, I started writing a novel. So I'm doing nonfiction journalism during the week and then weekends. And at night, it got to be like an addiction. Like I was having so much fun. I'm scribbling in these notebooks and I'm writing this novel. Wow. Well, anyway, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't really know the material because I hadn't been a reporter long enough either. So I wrote my first mystery novel and I did eventually get it published, but I couldn't make a go of it. It didn't sell. That was Naked Addiction. Mm-hmm. So I originally wanted to be a crime novelist. So it wasn't that I set out intending to write true crime. I wrote it because it was what I could get published. And because I was already writing journalism, it's kind of long form journalism.
Right.
But because I'd been going to these conferences and learning how to write fiction, I was able to write narrative nonfiction, which is, so it reads like a novel, but it's all true. So that's how I got, from fiction to nonfiction. And then I stuck with the true crime for about 12 books. And I kind of ran into a wall with this book we're going to talk about today, Down to the Bone, because I had some issues with the publisher delaying publication 3 times. So we'd set a release date and then they would change it. And that happened 3 times, which just kills your marketing momentum. It was very discouraging. I didn't know what was going on. It had to do with some internal stuff at the publisher that had nothing to do with me, but I didn't know that at the time. So I was really just feeling disheartened and I'm like, should I quit? No, I went back to the fiction. So I started powering into the fiction and I had a new agent and I sent him a new novel that I had been working on for, 17, 18 years. And he sat on it for a year before he sent it out. So, I was just super in a kind of a very discouraged place because, publishing is not an easy thing. And there's a lot of people who get discouraged and drop out. And because it's hard, it's really hard. The writing is one thing, the marketing is another thing, and you have to do both. And the world keeps changing and the publishing industry and the way to promote yourself keeps changing. So anyway, I ended up writing, by the time I got a deal for my new fiction 1 and 2, I had written 2.5 novels while I was waiting for Down to the Bone to come out and while I was waiting for people to read my fiction. So I was just in this vacuum and I just kept going. And I'm kind of doing that now too, because I've got book 3 under submission for the series. And now I've already written book 1, and I'm halfway through book 2 in a new series. So, because there's so much waiting that you have to do in publishing. And if you're prolific, and I don't have another day job, this is it. This is what I do. And I'm enjoying the fiction more. And it's the true crime. I got into it because I couldn't write the fiction. I couldn't get it published. I could write it, but I had to learn all my material and all my who the detectives really were and how they thought, how they did a case, how they investigated. And I learned that by doing all those true crime books. So now I know my material, and now I can write these fiction books too. So that's what I'm doing. I don't know. That sort of answered 2 questions at once, but
okay, that's great. So which was the first true crime that you had published?
Poisoned Love.
Poisoned Love was first. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, for people who read true crime, it's fascinating to me. How do you decide this is my topic? This is the case. This is the one, and I can make a book out of it. I'm sure that's something that's on everybody's mind.
So with my novel, the first one, my first novel took 17 years to get published. My second novel took 19 years to get published. The thing that's different about true crime is you don't keep rewriting a book and then send it out. You write a book proposal. So you come across a case that you are an expert in. You are the only person that you think you can do the best job. And you write a book proposal, which is basically a selling vehicle for the book. It's not written like a book. It's a marketing document. So you write an overview, and it tells the agent, who then sends it to the publisher, what the book is about. What are the high points? Who's the target market? What kind of publicity has this case gotten? So you kind of have to know what the publishers and the agents are looking for, but you also need to know what you personally want to live with for 2 years, at least 2 years. And in some cases, like Down to the Bone, that book, I had to work on it for 12 years, not every day, but off and on. And then once I got the contract, then it was every day. But you have to think, can I live with these people? Are they interesting enough? Is the case compelling enough? And what I've learned over time is I try not to do the same type of case twice. I always want to do something different. And so my trajectory has been going toward more social justice. And this last book also had a whole bunch of allegations of prosecutorial misconduct in it as well. So I didn't start out that way. I started out with pretty cut and dry cases. The prosecutor said this, the police said this, they got convicted, they went to prison, and I didn't question anything, because in those cases, I'm an investigative reporter, and I basically go where the evidence goes. But you have to figure out what it is that is going to be interesting to other people and what you can live with. And there are little bells that go off in my head, and it's so much harder now for those bells to go off, because I'll just give you an example. I was thinking about doing a case that just went to trial here. I waited 5 years, and there was so much local interest, which is one bell that goes off. Because you usually sell most of your copies locally, because it's a local case. It's just sort of, true crime is sort of a geographical regional thing. And yeah, it'll sell nationally, but you want to make sure that it definitely is going to sell where your bookstores are, where you're going to do your events, and where the news is going to have you on local TV, etc. So this case was a woman, 𝑨𝒖𝒕𝒉𝒐𝒓. She's Filipino, and she went missing. And so they arrested her husband, and 5 years later, the trial happened. Her body's never been found. And it was basically, he was on trial for killing her. So I went the first day, and the sound was inaudible. It was like, wah, 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 and I was like, well, that's a bad omen. They stuck us into an overview courtroom, so I couldn't see him. I couldn't see the attorneys. I couldn't see the judge. I could see the rest of us in the room all being frustrated with the wah, wah, wah. So it was being tortured, basically. And I was like, well, this is not going to work. And yeah, maybe I can get into the courtroom tomorrow when the opening statements are over. But it got to the point where I felt like this was a guy who killed his wife. I don't want to write a book about a creepy guy who killed his wife, because unfortunately that happens all the time. So I want a case where there's something unique and something where the characters are sympathetic in the family, the victim's family. And, there's just something about the case that has something more than your basic domestic violence. I mean, I have written books about men who've killed their wives.
Yeah,
and
I
men
was just
who've
going to
tried
say
to
you've
kill
done
their
those.
wives. I've done those, and I don't want to do another one. And
Right.
like I said, there's just so many murders like that. So you don't want to just pick a case just because it happened.
Right.
It has to be interesting. And I can usually tell. So there was another one that I wanted to do, and I haven't quite given up on it. But the staircase? Do you know the staircase case? They made a documentary out of it. They made a dramatic series out of it. The one with the theory that there were owls who might have possibly killed this woman. Anyway, but the husband was on trial and said, she fell down the stairs. And, obviously the prosecution thought that he pushed her, killed her, broke, she had injuries in her head. Mm-hmm. So there was a similar case to that happened here locally. And I wanted to do that. And I thought it was interesting because the defendant was an IVF doctor. So right away I thought, well, that's different. That's kind of interesting. And that's how he met his wife. And the other thing that was interesting was that his lawyer was Betty Broderick's lawyer. Oh. And so I thought, well, that's really interesting too. So anyway, I started trying to work on that, but it just turned out the victim's mother, initially talked to me and said she was going to cooperate, and then she didn't. And then the attorney said he was going to cooperate, and then he stopped returning emails. So, sometimes you want to do a case and it sounds like a good case, and then it falls apart for some other reason that you can't control. Right. So at this point, I don't have those problems with fiction. I just sit down and write.
Yeah, and you just make it up.
And I'm drawing on all the experience I have of covering all these cases, and I have a lot of ideas, and I'm pulling things and making them unique in combination. So they're definitely only something I could think of because it's drawn from my experience. And then this one I'm working on right now, I've been doing a lot of new research because I'm learning about things. So I miss not doing the true crime because I love research. I mean, that's one thing I'm really good at, and I love doing it because it's like, solving a puzzle. Mm-hmm. And so my books are extremely detailed, which some people like, a lot of people like, some people don't like. But my books are very detailed. And so that's because I get so into the research that I want to share everything that I find out.
Well, I like the detail, but of course, my background, I'm looking for the detail because, like you, trial transcripts and evidence and all that. I mean, that was my world. So how did you first become drawn to Dead Reckoning? And I want to talk about that a bit because I think for somebody who's not read true crime, that's a great entry point.
Okay.
Because it's such a fascinating case. And for those who are not familiar with it, it's a case of, he was a gentleman at the time and his wife. They went down to Newport Beach, convinced a couple that they had the means and wanted to buy their yacht, and went through all these machinations and negotiations and stuff, and had some associates with them. Correct me if I do anything wrong. This is from memory. And eventually what happened is they arranged for the sale. They got on the boat. They were going to go out for a test run, as I remember it. And they overpowered the couple, made them sign documents, power of attorney, that sort of thing. And the part that is just so creepy is they tied them to the anchor, threw them overboard, still alive, and they were never found, their bodies.
Right.
The brother happened to be the retired chief of police in Newport Beach. Came looking for them. Where are they? Got suspicious. And that's, as I recall, how the whole case started going. Now, the other interesting wrinkle about this case is that the motive for the crime was unique. And I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. Right. So when I started following this case, I didn't know anything about what you are hinting at, but I will get to that. I had finished with Poison Love, which was my first case, which is about the Kristen Rossum case. She was a toxicologist, San Diego County Medical Examiner's Office. She stole drugs from her lab to sedate her husband, and then basically poisoned him with fentanyl, which she apparently also stole from her lab. And he was found dead. And eventually they did the toxicology from an outside lab because there was conflict of interest, and found out that he had died from acute fentanyl intoxication. And fentanyl was not available like it is now. You couldn't get it.
I was just going to say, that's before people knew all about fentanyl.
So that book had come out, and I'm looking for another case. And there was a reporter in my newsroom who interviewed Ryan Hawks, who was Tom and Jackie Hawks' son, who lived in San Diego. And Tom Hawks, who is the victim, married to Jackie, he was a former firefighter in Carlsbad, and his brother was the police chief in Carlsbad, and that's in San Diego County.
Okay.
Yeah, not in Orange County. So this is actually had some local angles, which for me as a San Diego, local, I'm like I said, you want to sell a lot of your books where you live. So it had a local angle. So that's number one. Number two, Jim Hawks, as the victim's family, is a former police chief. His daughter is also a police officer. So they did the research, and when they handed in a missing persons report, it was they'd already done some of the investigation for the detectives, and had identified a suspect. And Skylar DeLeon was the one who showed up with his wife, and she was pregnant, and he their little baby, a 10-month-old daughter, Haley, was in a stroller. So they seemed like this perfectly nice young couple, totally innocent. And Jackie had a horrible motorcycle collision with her first husband, and he died in the crash. And she was damaged in the pelvic area, so she was not allowed to could not have children. So all of this played into all these little bells are going, right? And so it just seemed like they were such a great couple. They were so in love still. They had retired. They were just sailing around on their yacht. Their Tom's other son, Matt, was having a baby with his wife, and they were going to move to Arizona so they could spend time with the grandchild. So that's the setup. Skylar basically had this in his mind. He was looking for a boat to steal, and he was going to basically take them out to sea and kill them and keep the boat. But he had that planned in advance. Now, he had already been in a local jail in Seal Beach, where he met this guard named Alonzo McChain. And while he was actually doing work furlough, serving time for armed burglary in a previous situation, he went down to Mexico with his cousin and took a guy who he'd met in the jail, who was serving time for counterfeiting, convinced him to take $50,000 out of this condo that he owned with his mom, and they were going to go do a drug deal. Supposedly they were going to go down and buy drugs and then probably bring them back and sell them for a profit. But he took this guy down to Mexico, told him he was going to show him a surprise, put a shirt over his head, slit his throat, left him at the side of the road to die, kept the $50,000, went to California Pizza Kitchen, called Alonzo and said, "I'm going to be late," back to jail, and then went back to jail, where he proceeded to use a credit card to buy an anal sex machine from the jail computer, all in one day. So as I'm doing my research, I'm like, holy crap, this case is bizarre. And that was even before I found out, when the detective told me, don't know that the prosecutor is going to use this in his case in court, which is true. Actually, the prosecutor said the motive was greed. He didn't even really bring this up that much. But the detective, and I agree, think the motive was because Skylar needed money to get out of debt, but he also had already made an appointment for a sex change operation. He'd put down a deposit, and he didn't have enough money for the whole operation. And so his motive was he wanted money for a sex change operation. He'd been wanting a sex change operation for his whole life, and had been dressing up like a girl since he was 5 years old. So yeah, ding, ding, ding. I mean, you can't find a case that's more unique And, you've got the sympathetic victims. You've got a unique person who's a killer who is so charming and bizarre that he's just getting all these people. He lies to them and they are greedy. So he pays them or promises them millions of dollars and gets them all involved in this scheme to overpower Tom and steal the boat. He promised JFK, who he'd known for like 20 minutes, I'm going to get you millions of dollars. He's a gang member from the Long Island Crips. He'd been in and out of prison, but he was about to be a minister. So he got a guy who was supposedly going straight and convinced him to go out and kill these people. And so there wasn't millions of dollars. They ended up, each of the people who went on the boat was Alonzo and this guy, JFK, and Schuyler. So they needed 3 because Tom was a bodybuilder. He gave them each $1,300 because that's what they found on the boat. There was no more money. So anyway, I didn't learn that until much later, but this book involved going to 3 separate trials. I went almost every day, and I don't do that anymore. I can't afford the time, but I was still starting out and I was so into it. I wanted to go. And that was also in the days when I had competitors. So there were often 2 publishers who would do the same case, and St. Martin's would have a book come out like the day after the trial ended, and you would have 5 pages about the trial. And it was just like not a complete book. It was one of those quick hit ones that you buy in the grocery store. And mine would be the authoritative version, because I would wait and then get all this new information from the trial, because you didn't know all that stuff before the trial. You can do as much research and interviews as you want, but there's always new stuff that comes out at the trial. And if you're not there to hear it, and then I would go through all the exhibits and copy them all and interview people. And I mean, I just went all out on that book. I spent more time covering that case than any other case I've ever covered in any other book or story for the newspaper. So I've been on that case since 2004, I think. And I'm still following it. So,
and that case was, the book was just page after page of crazy. And just when you think it can't get crazier, there's more crazy. So I couldn't put it down. But here's the grand finale, so to speak. Schuyler DeLeon was convicted, was sentenced to death, was sent to what was death row, which they've done away with, at San Quentin. And we think, has had gender reassignment surgery courtesy of you and I.
Right.
The taxpayers. Because even though, and this is the part that just makes my head spin, there is a law that you cannot profit from your crime. Gender reassignment surgery is treated as health care.
Right.
So the courts have ordered the prisons in all states, not just here. It's it's considered a universal thing now. You must provide medical care to inmates. It's
under the 8th
constitutional right, 8th Amendment, and that encompasses gender treatment. So every inmate, at least in California, is given an opportunity to present and to live according to the gender with which they identify. And that means this whole concept that used to be you got assigned to the prison based on how you were born, basically, body parts, right? Just to be blunt. That doesn't work anymore. And so we believe, is now female. But kept the first name, Schuyler, and of course is not going to be getting out of prison. But that's the part that I think is a great discussion. So this would be a good book club book.
The other thing,
how do people feel about that?
I just wanted to mention, I just checked recently, and she is at Vacaville.
Mm-hmm.
So
she's been there before.
I know, but I mean, was waiting for her supposedly to change prisons. If she really got the surgery, that's how we're going to know for sure, because I have not been able to confirm because of HIPAA that she actually got the surgery. So,
well, but that won't allow you to confirm it because
that's the only way that I will know, that I will at least be more confident that she is.
And that's actually because PCR is not housing according to a birth gender any longer. It's, so it's possible that you would have,
I know that. Yeah.
Somebody anatomically female living in a different prison.
Right. But I'm still thinking that when she does finally get moved, it's because she's had the surgery, because I don't think they would move her otherwise. She's been asking for it for years. So
That's a decision that would have to be made, through a committee. And I have no idea what they're doing these days. I'm retired, but I do know that I was part of the group that was setting up those parameters. And, we visited inmates who were housed in a traditionally male prison, but were living and presenting as female. We went and talked with them and had a group meeting and got their input. And, we did a lot of things to try to understand all this, because it's
right.
It's a tough issue. That's what I'm saying. If people want to have a really good true crime book club book that will hook you in, keep you interested, keep the pages flying, and then have a lot to talk about, Dead Reckoning's the one.
I don't know. I know one person who I've ever talked to who supported tax dollars going towards Skylar getting that operation. Pretty much, on Facebook, there was not a single person. Everybody was just mad. Everybody was just like, I don't want my tax dollars going to give a murderer something that she wanted. And she is a she, whether she's had the surgery or not, because she's gone to court to legally change her gender. And that was a judge has decided that she is female. So her name is Skylar Preciosa de Leon.
Yeah. Well, we could do hours on this one. Yep. Let's talk about the most recent one that we really want people to go out and read. And I will tell you right now, pour a glass of wine or have a stiff drink or whatever keeps you calm when you read this book, because it made me crazy. This book is so hard. It's not hard to read. It reads like a fabulous novel.
Thank you.
But the case itself is so aggravating. You have a family of 4, just a normal day, seems like, right? And they just vanish. A husband and wife and 2 very young children, and they just poof, they're gone. And the weird thing is their house is left, again, stop me if I get anything wrong. I'm doing this from memory. It's left like they just picked up and walked out. There's food on the counter. There's nothing, no food or water for the dogs. And
or were forced out.
Right. But they're not people that who abuse their animals, and they're left on their own. Their truck's in the driveway and nobody can find them.
And nobody knows where they went, and they didn't tell anybody they were planning to go anywhere.
Right. So it's just like there's no clues. And then lo and behold, 4 years later?
Okay, so 3 years, the detective investigated this as a missing persons case, and he gave up after 3 years. And about 8 or 9 months later, their skeletal remains were found in the desert in 2 shallow graves, where they clearly had been the entire time, and they did not voluntarily go to Mexico like the detective said he thought they did. They had been bludgeoned in the back of the head with a 3-pound sledgehammer. Right. Which was found.
And it's just a motorcyclist just happens by, looks over and goes, "What's this?"
Yeah, there's a little white piece of bone that he catches the sun on a rock, and he picks it up, and he's like, well, this looks like maybe it could be human, because it was small. Maybe it was a child's face, essentially. I think that's basically was like the piece of the skull kind of in here. And so he called the sheriff, he called 911, and he's out in Victorville in the middle of this wash. Now, I don't really know if people know what a wash is, but it's just a big area, kind of sandy, and there's some shrubs, and it's near a landfill. And it's as you're driving east on Interstate 15, I believe, or 8.
I think it's 15. Yeah.
15. I can't remember.
On your way to Vegas.
I've written like 4 books since this. And so, the prosecution ultimately was like, well, this has to be somebody who knows the area. Why would they bury these people here? But the fact of the matter is there was 1 adult and 1 child in each of 2 shallow graves. And the thing this is one of the things that bothered me. is that there were 2 sets of tire tracks, one coming to each grave. And the tire tracks, the wheel diameter for the wheelbase, it was clear that it was 2 separate trucks, not one truck. And the wheelbase diameter did not match the guy who is sitting on death row right now with his truck. It did not match. And even though the prosecution kept kind of intimating that it did, their own witness told them that the measurement was not the same. And they had another witness who they had originally lined up to testify that the truck that showed up on the McStay family's neighbor's surveillance camera that they insisted was also this guy's truck, that it couldn't possibly have been this guy's truck, because in order to match up with the different patterns of light and the different pieces of the car that were reflecting light or whatever, his wheels would have had to have been under the ground in order for it to be the same truck. I mean, this stuff came out at trial, and I don't know what the jury was doing, but it just, you know, there were enough of things like that. The timeline was completely contradictory, the prosecution's own timeline. And this all was built on what the investigations put together with the sheriff's department. So there were, you know, both investigations, both the San Diego County investigation, which ended up culminating with the guy giving up and saying they went voluntarily to Mexico. That was flawed. And then the second investigation, where they decided it was this guy within like 3 or 4 months and waited to arrest him, trying to find evidence to back up their whole premise and repeatedly failing, in, you know, arrested him anyway and took him to trial. And honestly, I'm not taking a position that this guy is innocent. It's just that there were so many problems with this case that's why it makes people upset to read it. And I'm wondering if that may be why more people haven't bought it, because people are like, this is a hard book to read. And I think people may be thinking, oh, so I don't want to read it. Well, no, it just shows how messed up our criminal justice system is. So it's an investigative book. It's not like a fun read like true crime is for some people. This one is really showing you what went wrong with this case. And I guess
Talk
that's
a little
not
bit
for
about
everybody.
the cell phone issues. Those made me cuckoo.
Okay, so the Skylar DeLeon case, actually, the trial for JFK, I went to every day, and the defense, one of the defense guys had been on the O.J. Simpson trial. Oh. So he was one of the 2, because when you're on a death penalty defense team, there's usually 2 lawyers.
Oh, yeah. This
guy and his partner, I forget who the other guy was. Oh, the other guy was an African-American guy who I think also was on the OJ case. It's been such a long time. That book was a really long time ago. But anyway, they were talking about how the police had screwed up this case and were, you know, saying that this guy was someplace that he wasn't because his cell phone wasn't really there. And they were going on and on about all this cell phone technology. And I didn't believe them because, you know, the prosecution and the prosecutor was so charismatic that you just don't want to listen to what the other people are saying, no matter what. And I think that's kind of what ended up happening in McStay, even though I don't think the prosecutor was charismatic. They just believed everything that the prosecution said just because it was the prosecution saying it. But this cell phone technology came up first then, and that just because your phone pings on a certain tower doesn't mean that you're actually right next to that tower. And I didn't believe him. I thought, oh no, he must be, because they really drew it all out and showed where, you know, where the boat had gone, and they had other cross supporting evidence, like Skylar put in the GPS coordinates at this particular time, and then he made a phone call to Jennifer on this cell phone, and so they triangulated the whole route. And they had another witness who said, yeah, I took him scuba diving to the deepest place in the water, which is 3,500 feet. And that's where they stopped. So all that stuff kind of supported each other. And so that's why I guess I didn't believe the defense attorneys when they were talking about cell phone technology. But in this McStay case, the cell phone technology was far more central to the case. However, and this is the reason that Chase Merritt is still upset to this day, the defense attorney, there were again two, the one who was in charge of the cell phone technology and the witness did not call the expert witness to testify to all of this. And so it ended up coming up later at sentencing after that attorney had been disqualified because he said, I have a conflict of interest and can't defend myself while I'm also trying to defend my client. And they still didn't call the expert witness who was going to come in there and basically say that there's a tower right near where the bodies were buried. And according to Chase Merritt and his attorney and the witness who didn't testify, that tower was faulty. So it was giving out signals. It was giving out faulty data, and the records that they had, which did not match the records that were given out in discovery. So apparently the prosecution had extra records from the FBI that they never gave to the defense. And so they were using information that the defense never even had access to. But anyway, basically showed that the signal seemed like it was coming from one place when it was actually going in the opposite direction. And so the other thing is cell phone reception out in the desert is very weird, and it's very hard to get a call to complete. So
Right.
The prosecution said that Chase Merritt called his wife a bunch of times when in fact these were never completed calls because the signal just kept dropping. And what I learned is, your cell phone doesn't necessarily ping on the closest tower. If that tower is busy because there are too many people using that tower, it'll go to the next tower. And if you're using just the tower records to see where somebody was, you're going to be wrong some of the time because it doesn't necessarily correlate that way. And the prosecution's witness actually said that. You can't use these phone records to specifically say where any defendant is. And because the tower was right next to the graves, he had to have been burying them there because why else would the phone be pinging off the tower? Well, they explained why, that it could have been any place. He could have been at his sister's house, which was nearby.
And the jury just bought that.
Because it's so technical and boring, and the prosecution just put up slide after slide after slide after slide after, and I described it as mind numbing, like a mind numbing number of exhibits, and they did the same thing with the DNA evidence. I mean, I thought that was really important too. And I think the jury just couldn't process complicated scientific stuff. And when the prosecution dismisses it as junk science, they go, okay, I don't have to try to understand it because he's already told us that it's not right. Or that it's
where's the judge then?
The judge completely abdicated his
the judge is supposed to stop that kind of evidence from coming into the record and poisoning the jury.
Well, he blocked a lot of stuff from coming in that the defense wanted to bring in. That's for sure.
So we have a guy. Here's the bottom line for this book. We have 4 people who died horrible deaths, 2 young people, and 2 children.
3 and 4, very young,
did not get to live their lives.
Right.
Who were unaccounted for in unmarked, horrible conditions. So their family could not even lay them to rest in an appropriate manner for years. And you have now to make all of that much worse. We don't know really who killed them. We don't know really why they were killed. I mean, there's speculation about motive and finances and, the business and all that kind of stuff, but we don't know for sure. And if we're wrong, and that's again why this is a great book club book, guys. If you want to really have a juicy discussion with your friends, we have a guy sitting in prison who maybe doesn't belong there.
Mm-hmm. Now, I also want to say Chase Merritt is no angel.
Well, no, but
he was a con man and he lied a lot. And the problem was that he lied so much and he cheated other business partners out of money and did not pay his debts and left people hanging. And they brought all that up and it was all in the evidence and some of it got in and some of it didn't. The problem is, and he was in prison before. but he was never in prison for anything violent.
No.
And he considered Joseph McStay to be his best friend. And it didn't make logical sense why he would kill the goose that laid the golden egg when he was the guy who was paying all of his bills. And so what the prosecution said is, well, Joseph found out that Chase was stealing from him and forging checks and writing them on this program on the computer. When in fact, Chase said, look, I said this to the detective in the very first interview, and I explained all of that. And then it went right over that detective's head, honestly, which is clear from my investigation. And even when he got a tip later from somebody who was an amateur sleuth and pointed this out to him, he's kind of went back and asked him some questions, but I think he just didn't really get it. And then that is what the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department honed in on. And that's what they made their whole case, was about these allegations that he had been forging checks. But the problem with that theory is, for me, okay, it was like $20,000. And some of those checks went to another vendor that he paid for this job that they were trying to do. So it ended up being probably $16,000. Are you going to kill a family 4 and 2 little kids for $16,000? Really? I mean, that just, to me, is that really what somebody would do?
It makes no sense.
And somebody who's 59 years old and has never hurt anybody, has a little boy of his own, has 3 kids. Is he going to suddenly decide to kill a family of 4 at age 59? It didn't make sense to me. Those dots were not connecting for me.
Not when you've never been violent before.
Right. You don't suddenly become violent. And he wasn't a drinker. And he didn't use drugs, because that sometimes happens, but he wasn't.
Well, I'm assuming that he was condemned on top of it to death. Even though we don't execute anybody in California, he's condemned technically.
Yep.
God knows we'll probably never start executions again, but.
Well, I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen, because what's going to happen with the next governor? I mean, if it's another Democrat, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, people in California have voted for the death penalty, that they wanted it. I don't know if that would still be the case if they voted again today, because they found out that there have been so many cases that were found that they were wrong and that these people were innocent. I don't know. I mean, I don't take a position either way, but I mean, if for somebody who did kill a whole family of 4, I think a lot of people would think that was fitting, but you better get it right.
I will tell you this. I had an open invitation to attend an execution.
I think if you're going to write about it or work in that environment, that you should watch an execution. And I have, for that reason.
But we stopped executing people. So I never,
so
there were no executions during my time there.
I can tell you about the one I watched. It was horrifying.
I didn't work at the institution the whole time. I just went there for specific reasons. But I was told that if there was going to be an execution and I wanted to attend, that could be arranged. And I thought to myself, I would like to know how that feels to watch. And just so that when this issue comes up, I would have some personal experience, because it's going to happen whether I'm there or not.
Right.
Will it give me nightmares? Will I be able to live with it? Will I feel like justice was carried out? I was really interested in finding out, but like I said, it never happened. And the problem with the executions, as I understand it, and this is just coming from the headlines, since it's no inside information, is that they can't get the drugs or anybody to carry it out.
Right. Well, it's because they found that the last of the 3 that they were using causes intense pain. That's why they stopped using it. So, and that's why they couldn't get people to do it, because they were torturing people. But let me just tell you real briefly about the one that I watched, because I think this is interesting for people to know. So I went the first time. My husband, who was a troubled man and had borderline personality disorder, which basically means that he had problems separating himself from me and what I was doing from what he felt was part of him. So he wasn't able to separate those things. And he went to see his therapist, and she tried to explain to him that we were separate people and he needed to leave me alone about this. But he basically harassed me like the entire night before I was getting ready to go watch this execution, which I felt I needed to do for my job. And it was my job, but he felt like it was such a wrong thing to be happening that he couldn't handle the fact that I was going to watch it. So I had to deal with that whole emotional nonsense before I even left the house.
Wow.
And it turned out that we'd booked me on the wrong day in the flight. And so I ended up getting there with 15 minutes to spare. I was so stressed out. And then they called it off because they gave him a stay. So I had to go back a second time. And that time they did do it, and I was there for it. And this is what bothered me. I wrote this story beforehand, and there were 2 jurors who had since changed their mind, and they found out that they found out information that they would have changed their vote. And that was because he was accused of raping this woman and then helping to bury the body with this friend of his who used to be involved with her. And so the bottom line is, if there was no rape, he was no longer eligible for the death penalty. Well, so his friend, who had a private attorney and ended up getting a completely different sentence, said he walked in and saw them having what looked like consensual sex earlier, the guy who ended up being executed and this guy's former girlfriend. So he said basically there was no rape. And for some reason, this guy could not get any kind of appeal approved because it was too late, which is insane, right? So he ends up having this relationship with a lawyer. It's not his lawyer. And she was also one of the witnesses across the room. And so this is what I remember. I'm in this room with the other reporters, and all you can hear is the air conditioning, except for this woman across the room who's crying. And I can see the man who's on the table strapped down, and he kept lifting his head up and saying, and that to me, it still chokes me up, because he claimed to the very end, you have the wrong person. I did not kill this woman. And it was horrible to watch, because I think he may have been innocent, and they killed a man, and I had to watch that. So I'm still a reporter at heart. I still try to stay objective and neutral, but that was very difficult to watch. And I stayed up and I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up and I wrote my story for the paper, and I flew back the next day. And I had to ask somebody at the table who had been sitting right in front of him, what was he saying? Because I couldn't really see from my angle. And that's what they said. I love you. I love you. And I'm like, well, who is that woman? And so I did my reporting the next day in order to fill in the blanks about what I had been watching. It was really hard.
Well, I don't know. It remains to be seen what will happen in the future.
Mm-hmm. You better get it right. If you're going to kill somebody, you better get it right. That's all I can say.
And there are plenty of cases of DNA evidence and things coming to light and people being released. So it's a very, very treacherous.
Yep.
If I were on a jury, I don't know that I would be able to vote for the death penalty at this point in my life. I really don't, because it's just too many questions. Life in prison, yes, because if I'm convinced of their guilt, then that's an appropriate sentence. Yes. But, that always leaves open the possibility for finding new evidence down the road, Mm-hmm. I mean, look at Scott Peterson. He's still carrying on that there's new evidence.
I have to wonder what is going on with that case, because, I've seen documentaries and I ended up getting involved somehow tangentially in that. But I guess he had a family member who was murdered in San Diego. And I got my very first time on national TV. They had Greta Van Susteren had me on her show to talk about that, because I had written a story for the paper going back into our archives, like 60 years or something. There was some kind of something that happened with a pipe in a tire yard, and I can't remember now, but yeah.
Apparently
that family's been through a lot. There's
a new documentary, and he's still insisting he's innocent, and they're still filing, and I don't know. It's going on and on and on. And he's been, that was 2002, Christmas of 2002.
He did not act like an innocent man. Let's put it that way.
That's all I'm going to say about it.
That's all I'm going to say too, because I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know the details of the case well enough to have an opinion. But what I do know, I've always thought it sounds like he did it. I mean, just the way he was acting, and the things that he did and the things that he said.
Amber Fry and that whole,
that whole
craziness.
thing. Yeah.
All right.
Anyway.
So Down to the Bone is the most recent true crime, and it's on sale everywhere.
And I just wanted to say real quick, I meant to say this earlier. This is Death on Ocean Boulevard, and
that's a great one too.
Everybody loves this book. It's like it's like my best-selling book in a long time. I consider that part 1 and and Down to the Bone part 2, because it's the same sheriff's department, it's the same homicide unit, and both cases involve allegations of confirmation bias, which basically means that these investigators decided on something and would not let go of it no matter what came up to the contrary. And so in the case of Death on Ocean Boulevard, they said it was a suicide, and everybody in their family and a civil jury said, no, we think it was a murder. And a lot of people, general citizens, they all think it's a murder, and they just refuse to let go of this premise that she killed herself.
No, after reading the book, I think it's murder. Now, do you have body parts there to hold up?
I don't actually.
Okay.
Sorry.
Before I let you go, I do want to tell people, these books sometimes, they're hard to read. Let's be honest. This is human beings a lot of times not at their best.
But there's no violence in this book. I just want to be clear. When I read a true crime book, Body Parts has violence in it. This book does not have any violence in it. And you don't, because I don't even know how that family was killed, other than we know there's a hole in their skull, that they were probably bludgeoned with a sledgehammer, but I don't describe that because we don't know what happened.
Right. But Body Parts is a tough book to read, but I want to tell people there's a new edition that you did an update with the latest facts. And if you're looking for a book that you can really dig your teeth into, and interesting crimes, tough crimes, but there's a sort of happy ending because there was some closure provided for a victim's family. And it's one of my favorite books of yours. And the reason is because of the way the story unfolds. It's like a crime novel. It's very cinematic in many ways as compared to some of your other ones, which are just very fact-based. They still read like novels, but it's more facts. But that one plays out more like a movie in my head. Maybe I'm just crazy, but that's the way it worked for me. And
it's a character study into a very, very troubled guy who's a serial killer, who kills and rapes and tortures 4 women and then turns himself in. Now, when does that ever happen? That's why I did the book. And then the new part is that 25 years later, after he dismembered his first victim, the cold case detectives were able to identify his first victim through genetic genealogy. And that gave her family closure because now they know what happened to her, because she was missing and they didn't know what happened to her.
Right. So they were able to find some peace, at least in knowing.
Right.
And so if you're looking for a book that, like I said, has that angle to it with some happiness, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. The sister was very grateful. In fact, before I even wrote the new edition, I was interviewing her, but she read my first book 3 times and she said, that's my sister. She'd never read the book before, but she had this call on her answering machine from this detective calling from Eureka. And so she kind of did this research online before she called him back, and she read my book, and she's like, because he described her, what she was like, and that she had a very specific tattoo. So she was, when I interviewed her, she told me she did get some closure, and she felt good to know finally, what had happened. Because she was feeling bad about it because the sister used to come back and stay with her. And she talked to her on the phone, and she was worried that she said something wrong, and then she just disappeared, and she just kind of took it in on herself. So,
and like you said, it's a character study. It's also another great book for book clubs to discuss because it deals with the issue of mental illness.
Yeah.
And a person who really needed help
and didn't get it. And the same with the victim, that she didn't get it either. And that's one of the things her sister said. This is a really sad case because they kind of found each other, those two, and they both needed help. He even said she had a brain like me, it wasn't quite working right.
Yeah. And this guy knew he was troubled. And
he knew he would kill again, and that's why he turned himself in. He had to make his brother help him because he knew he would probably try to get out of it at the end, which he did. Right. And his brother was like, no, we're going.
But his family knew he was troubled. And, you know, there were things that they could have done, but they did not for whatever reason. And I'm not here to judge people.
Well, his mother was long gone. His mother was a whole piece of work, and his father wasn't that type of person to help anybody, I don't think. So,
well, but, you know, I'm just saying it's like,
which is why he was the way he was, you know.
Yeah. It's a cautionary tale.
Yes.
You know, for a lot of
people. And he had a very serious head injury, which from a motorcycle crash.
Right.
No, I'm sorry, it wasn't a motorcycle crash. It was because he helped a crash victim, and some drunk driver ran into him, knocked his jaw off, and he was in the ICU with a severe head injury for 9 days. So I'm sorry, he rode a motorcycle, but it wasn't a motorcycle crash.
Right. But I mean, that's another component of the, you know.
So you said all the bells going off, those are all the things, you know.
Right. So these are all great books for book clubs that want to have really intense discussions, and after they've read some really, really engrossing true crime stories. And I have friends that are like true crime addicts. They watch all the documentaries and they want to read all the books. So tell me, before I let you go quickly, is there any more true crime in your future? Are you looking for that other one? I see you talked about the 2 cases that have not really been working out.
There were actually 3 cases that I've tried and failed to do a book on. So there was another one too about a woman who was convicted of murder, and then she was ultimately acquitted. Because it was found again, sheriff's department, same sheriff's department, did an investigation for 3 days, which I found out. Anyway, she decided to go with another writer. But so I have tried to find another book. I've got that staircase one that's still, and then this last one I thought I was going to do, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So at the moment, I mean, I can't say never, but right now I'm writing fiction. And you know what? It's kind of dark fiction. I mean, I've had people who like true crime who've been reading the fiction, and they like it. and I like it. And one in particular was telling me that it's pretty similar to my true crime, actually. So if there are people who are purists and they're like, oh no, I only read true crime, you might just give my fiction a try.
Well, I love the first 2 books. I'm waiting for the 3rd one.
All right, cool.
Hooked and Staged. Those are the first 2. Well, actually, there's 3. There's Naked Addiction. And I really recommend that people go back and start with Naked Addiction, because you get to know Ken good.
Right.
And it's a very compelling story in that one, very compelling crime. And then by the time you get ready for Hooked, you already know a lot about him. And then in comes Katrina, and you get to know her, and then that story continues into Staged. That's all I'm going to say.
And I've got 3 and 4. I don't know. My editor is reading 3 right now. I wish she would make a decision, because I'm sitting here going. Anyway, but like I said, I've started a new series, and this one is really interesting. So the first one is about a sex cult. The sequel is coming out of that, and it's going to be about child psychopaths. And talk about dark, but I'm trying to do my best to keep to the drama, and any violence is going to happen off stage, because I am not going to write children hurting other people. I'm just not, I am not going there.
Good.
Because we know it happens, but we don't need to see it, and we don't need to watch it, and we don't need to read about it. But we know it happens. I mean, look at these school shootings. Right. You know, there are kids going in there with a gun, and what is going on in their minds? So one of the kids is a school shooter. So
this sounds fascinating.
I've been studying psychopaths and sociopaths, and I've been reading memoirs that they've written, and it's fascinating. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't know if I'm twisted or what, but I just find it fascinating. So dark, but you know, I think this one's going to be really good. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about it.
Well, you know who to call when it's ready to be read.
Oh, I will. Don't you worry.
Well, thanks for doing this.
Thank you. This was an intense, really great conversation. Thank you so much.
I loved it. I love talking. Yeah. Well, you have more books we could talk about, but at least we hit the highlights, and maybe we can get people started on them, and then they can always go to your website and check out all the rest, because there's a bunch more that we didn't even mention yet.
That's true.
So,
okay.
All right. Well, thank you.
You have a great day.
You too. We'll do it again.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.